Hey students, I hope you're having a great day today. My name is Torres and I want to take a moment to thank you for joining me for a little Psych 101. In this video, we will learn about the psychology of memory and attention. This video has 4 overarching ideas. Attention and memory are both important in learning new information. Attention is the process by which the mind chooses from among various stimuli that strike the senses at any given moment. Memory is the process of encoding, storing, and retrieving information, and memory includes factual and general information, experiences of events, and skills. The topic of this video will focus on the vocabulary on these 2 slides. You can find this information in the Google slide presentation and in the Psych 101 Key Vocab Google Doc. Both of these files are linked in the description box below. How does memory work? In brief, the cognitive process of memories has 4 basic steps. Attention, in which we filter through what we experience in the world. Encoding, how we process what our attention admits into our minds. Storage, what happens once information enters the brain. And retrieval, the recall of that information or behavior. Everything we do or know is influenced by these 4 processes. What we pay attention to, how we encode it, what happens to it when it goes into storage, and how we retrieve it is what we will discuss today. The concept of attention is studied to explain how we process the environmental information with the help of our sensory neurons. The process of attention involves the very act of listening and concentrating on specific object, topic, or event for fulfilling the desired goals. Attention allows a person to tune out the less relevant information, perception, or sensation for that moment, and instead focus more or prioritize more on the information which is more relevant. There are external and internal foci of attention. External focus of attention describes where the performer's attention is directed to the effect of the action, while internal focus of attention is described as where attention is directed to the action itself. External factors like noise or too much movement can undermine the amount of attention that you're able to pay to a particular stimuli. Internal factors such as interest, motive, mindset, and attitude can also have an effect on the level of attention a person will pay on stimuli. There are 4 types of attention: orienting attention, divided attention, selective attention, and sustained attention. Orienting attention involves aligning attention with a source of sensory signals. This might be overt, as in eye movements, or covert, without any movement. Orienting can be manipulated by presenting a cue indicated where in space a person should attend, thereby directing attention to the cued location. This picture shows an example of how orienting attention can be manipulated. If one person starts to look up and point, other people will be cued to also look up in the same direction. Divided attention is a higher level skill where you have to perform 2 or more tasks at the same time, and attention is required for the performance of both or all the tasks. You probably know this as multitasking. Examples of multitasking include driving a car while carrying on a conversation with a passenger, or eating dinner while watching the news. If the task is to write a story, a learner must be able to think about their characters and the plot, as well as spelling and punctuation rules that apply. When people are required to do more than one task at a time, performance on at least one of the tasks often declines. It is generally agreed that humans have a limited capacity to process information. When several tasks must be performed at the same time, the demands of the tasks may exceed an individual's processing capacity. Selective attention is the process of focusing on a particular object in the environment for a certain period of time. It's a limited resource, so selective attention allows us to tune out unimportant details and focus on what really matters. Imagine you're sitting at your desk, quickly trying to finish a homework assignment that's due in 2 hours. Multiple activities happen around you: keyboard sound, chit-chatting, chair movement, slight traffic noise from your window, mobile ringtones, notification alarms, and any other sounds compete for your attention. Out of all of these noises, you find yourself able to side out all the irrelevant sounds and focus on your upcoming deadline. Have you ever been showed a card trick by a magician? When we are shown a trick, we pay attention to the hands of the magician in an attempt to catch what they are doing. When we do this, we are utilizing our selective attention. We are not focused on what else might be happening around us, but only on what we select to focus our attention on. Sustained attention is the ability to focus on an activity or stimulus over a long period of time. It is what makes it possible to concentrate on activity for as long as it takes to finish it, even when there are other distracting stimuli present. If a person is required to perform a task for a long period of time, and that task requires sustained attention, it's best for the person to slowly build up their stamina to be able to maintain this long period of sustained attention. For example, air traffic controllers are notorious for their necessary sustained attention skills, as their job is to pay close attention to a monotonous activity for a long period of time. If an air traffic controller has poor sustained attention, there is a potential for life-threatening consequences. While many jobs require long periods of sustained attention, like air traffic controllers, surgeons, and surveillance teams, most jobs will not demand this from their workers. However, a basic level of sustained attention is necessary for all jobs. Executive attention is a function involved in the regulation of thoughts, emotions, responses, distractions, problem solving, and switching between multiple pieces of information. Executive attention skills develop as a child grows into an adult, which is when their frontal brain structures develop. Damage to the frontal lobe can affect the role of executive attention in the control of thought, behavior, and emotion. The Stroop test is an example of where executive attention is required to give correct responses. This image is a section of the Stroop test. The purpose of the Stroop test is for you to concentrate to name the color of each word. So, for example, the first row would be red, blue, green. For a person to give the correct answers, the type of attention activated is executive attention. In brain imaging studies conducted while a person takes the Stroop test, they have established that the frontal lobe of the brain is what is inhibiting the automatic response of reading the word and giving the wrong response. There are different ways to take the Stroop test online. I will leave a link to one Stroop test site in the description box below. Try it and see how you do. As a person pays attention, the brain also works actively to label and code the information, organizes new information with similar information, and connects new concepts to existing concepts. This can happen through two types of processing. Automatic processing encodes details like time, space, frequency, and the meaning of words. This is usually done without conscious awareness, like remembering the last time you watched a Psych 101 with Torres video. When was the last time you learned a new skill or had to put forth effort and attention to understand what you were doing? Using a new computer program for the first time may have been difficult, but if you use that program every day for a whole semester or a whole year at a new job, it becomes second nature. The additional information about the skill starts to encode automatically and turns what used to be effortful processing into automatic processing. We can encode information a variety of different ways. Semantic coding is the process of encoding sensory input that has a particular meaning or can be applied to a particular context rather than deriving it from a particular sense. For example, meaning can be attributed to a written word if someone elaborates on the context of the word's meaning. So for example, instead of just giving you a list of vocabulary words to look at, it will be more meaningful to you if you understand what the words mean within the context of this video. Visual encoding is the process of encoding images and visual sensory information. The amygdala, which is located in the medial temporal lobe of the brain and has a primary role in processing emotional reactions, fulfills an important role in visual encoding as it accepts visual input in addition to input from other systems and encodes the positive or negative values of the stimuli. It's the work of the amygdala that associates a feeling of love when you see someone you love, or the feeling of fear when you see something that scares you. Acoustic encoding is the process of encoding of sound, words, and other auditory input for storage and later retrieval. By associating an information with sounds, like a car braking or the sounding out of words to make sense of the word, the neural connections become stronger and aid in the recall process. For example, it's much more easy to know the words of a song when you hear the music of the song. The sensory input from the music encoded it in your brain and organized it with an area that knows the words to the sound. When your brain goes to retrieve the language associated with the sound, it's much more easy to do. One thing that actually increases encoding is the self-reference effect. The self-reference effect is the tendency to remember information that directly relates to you, as opposed to remembering less personal information. So you've paid attention, your brain has encoded the relevant information. How will your memories be stored? There are various conceptual models that explain the storing of memories. For our class, we're going to concentrate on the Atkinson-Shiffrin model of memory. The Atkinson-Shiffrin, or AS model, assumes there are 3 separate memory stores, and that information is transferred between these stores in a linear sequence. Each of the memory stores differs in the way information is processed or encoded, how much information can be stored, capacity, and for how long or the duration. The first store is sensory memory, or SM. Sensory memory is the storage of brief sensory events such as sights, sounds, and tastes. It's only stored up for a couple of seconds. Sensory memory plays an important role in your ability to take in information and interact with the world around you. This type of memory allows you to retain brief impressions of a tremendous amount of information. Would you like to test your sensory memory? Turn off the video and try this. Close your eyes for a few seconds. Open your eyes for 1 or 2 seconds, just long enough to focus on an object, any object, and then close them again. For a very brief time, you will see the image in your mind's eye. This is one example of sensory memory at work, keeping the image alive for a brief time after the stimulus is gone. In some instances, this information may be transferred to short-term memory that we'll talk about in a second, but in the majority of cases, this information is quickly lost. While sensory memory may be brief, it plays a critical role in attention and memory processes. Short-term memory, or STM, is also referred to as working memory, and it's a temporary storage system that processes incoming sensory memory. Short-term memory only lasts about 20 seconds, and it only has the capacity to process about 5 to 9 items at any one point in time. If the memory is important, then it is eventually transferred to long-term memory through consolidation. Rehearsal can help consolidate this information into long-term memory because it consciously repeats the information that is important and needs to be remembered. Have you ever had to remember a short list, like going to the store and you have to bring back milk, eggs, and a loaf of bread? You might have repeated those things over and over in your head so you didn't forget. Milk, eggs, loaf of bread. Milk, eggs, loaf of bread. This helped transfer something that might have been stuck in your short-term memory into your long-term memory so that you could make it back from the store with the correct 3 items. Long-term memory is the final stage of the multi-store memory model proposed by Atkinson and Shiffrin, providing the lasting retention of information and skills. Long-term memory refers to the memory process in the brain that takes the information from short-term memory store and creates long-lasting memories. These memories can be from an hour ago or several decades ago. Theoretically, long-term memory can hold an unlimited amount of information for an indefinite period of time. There are 2 components of long-term memory: explicit and implicit. Explicit memories are memories of facts and events we can consciously remember and declare. Explicit memories include 2 types: semantic, which is knowledge about words, concepts, and language. So, for example, knowing the concept of Santa Claus, or the meaning of the words TikTok, or the meaning of the word McDonald's. Episodic memories include information about events that we have personally experienced, like remembering your first day of school, or remembering what you wore to an important event. Implicit memories are memories that are not part of our consciousness. Rather, they are formed through behaviors. Procedural memory stores information about how to do things, like how to ride a bike or how to tie your shoelaces. Implicit memories also include behaviors learned through emotional conditioning. You might have a fear of spiders, but not consciously remember why they occurred, what conditioned that fear. Your mind just remembers that you think spiders are a bad thing and you get scared. You don't have to consciously stop to think about it. Great. We've paid attention. The stimuli was encoded into our sensory memory and then transferred into our short-term memory. And if the information was important enough, it was stored in long-term memory. Now, how do we get the information out of storage when we need it? The act of getting information out of memory storage and back into consciousness awareness is called retrieval. Retrieval is needed for everyday functioning, like knowing how to get to work or how to perform your job once you get there. There are 3 ways to retrieve information from storage. Recall, which is being able to access the information without any cues or reminders. Recognition, being able to identify information that you have previously learned after encountering it again. And relearning, learning information again that you have previously learned. An example of recall might be a professor asking you to write an essay about a topic. You don't have anything there to help you remember what you learned. An example of recognition might be if a professor gave you a multiple choice test. You might look at the options and one of them may seem familiar, or it will have reminded you of the correct answer when you might have not been able to state it without any sort of cue. Relearning is when you just sort of have to brush up on a skill or concept so that you can work with it again. An example of relearning might be attending a review midterm session. Since you already knew the information at one point, relearning it will be quicker because there is residual information in your long-term memory that will aid in the learning process. Under certain conditions, retrieval may be easier. Retrieval is more likely to be successful if the conditions of the retrieval are similar to the conditions of learning. This principle is called encoding specificity. For example, according to the encoding specificity principle, if you decided to study for a psych test in the library, then you're more likely to remember things that you studied if you also take the test in the library. In earlier videos, we looked at the role of biology in the field of psychology. Remember, everything psychological is simultaneously biological. Different parts of the brain work together to remember different types of memory throughout the memory process. The amygdala, which is part of the limbic system, is involved in fear and fear memories. For example, take a third grader whose parents are going through a very messy divorce. The third grader's amygdala is triggering a strong fear reaction, causing the child to be anxious about what is happening at home while they're at school. Their attention is now taken from what is happening at school and focusing on what might be happening at home. While they might not be able to retain what is happening in the classroom, the triggered reaction by the amygdala makes the trauma more concrete in the long-term memory. So the child will be forgetting what happens at school, but they won't ever be able to forget the stress or the fear that they experienced. The amygdala processes this emotional information, which is important in encoding memories at a deep level and important in memory consolidation. The hippocampus, which is also part of the limbic system, is associated with explicit memory, recognition memory, and spatial memory. It projects information to other regions of the cortex that give memory meanings and connect them with other similar memories. Damage to the hippocampus leads to the inability to process new memories. We also discussed neurons and neurotransmitters in an earlier video. If you recall, communication among neurons happened via neurotransmitters. Communication among neurons via neurotransmitters is critical for developing new memories. Strong emotional experiences can trigger the release of neurotransmitters, which then in turn strengthen memory. Repeated neuron activity increases the neurotransmitters in the synapse and creates a stronger synaptic connection. This is how memory consolidates itself. The neurotransmitters that are involved in memory are epinephrine, dopamine, serotonin, glutamate, and acetylcholine. The theory that suggests that strong emotions trigger the formation of strong memories and weak emotional experiences form weaker memories is called arousal theory. Some researchers use flashbulb memories as evidence of arousal theory. Flashbulb memories are exceptionally clear recollections of an important emotional event. It's the recall of very specific images or details about a vivid, rare, or significant event. For example, one thing that always struck me when I talked to New Yorkers about where they were when 9/11 happened is how often people would try to tell me how blue the sky was. Everybody talks about how blue the sky was that morning. If you go to the 9/11 memorial, there is actually a section where people tried to paint the correct color, like from their memory of what the color of blue the sky was. This very distinct, vivid memory can be classified as a flashbulb memory and, as some researchers may believe, can be tied to arousal theory. So what happens when we forget? Well, forgetting can occur at any memory stage. Sometimes the information is encoded into the long-term memory, but the person cannot retrieve it. Depending on the type of interference, retrieval cues, moods, and motives, some memories may be retrieved and some may never be retrieved. Encoding failure occurs when a memory is never stored in our memory in the first place. Successful encoding requires a lot of effort and attention. Let's look at these 4 nickels. Can you tell which coin is the accurate depiction of the US nickel? Most Americans can't because we do not encode the specific details. We just know enough to differentiate it from the other coins. Amnesia is the loss of long-term memory that occurs as a result of a disease, physical trauma, or psychological trauma. There are 2 common types of amnesia: Anterograde amnesia and retrograde amnesia. Anterograde amnesia is the inability to remember new information after the point of trauma. In these situations, the hippocampus is usually affected. The trauma to the hippocampus causes inability of the brain to transfer information from short-term memory to long-term memory. Retrograde amnesia is the loss of memory, partial or complete, for events that happened prior to the trauma. Let's talk for a second about how memories are constructed or reconstructed. Construction is the formulation of new memories, and reconstruction is the process of bringing up old memories. Suggestibility is the effects of misinformation from external resources that leads to a creation of a false memory. Memories are very fragile, and this makes them vulnerable to the power of suggestion. Suggestibility can cause people to claim to remember something that was only a suggestion made by someone else. An important area of study has been the role of suggestibility in eyewitness testimonies. Eyewitness testimonies are no longer considered the best type of testimony. Most experts agree that a number of factors can influence eyewitness accounts. Since law enforcement has had the ability to conduct DNA testing, a number of incarcerated people were found to be wrongfully convicted for a crime they did not commit. According to the Innocence Project, the leading cause of wrongful conviction was eyewitness misidentification. Other areas of study include research on repressed memories and research on false memories. Some psychologists believe it's possible to completely repress traumatic childhood memories. This concept is referred to as repressed memories. Some researchers question if the idea of repressed memories are accurate or whether the process of questioning and suggestibility leads to the misinformation effect. False memory syndrome is the recall of false autobiographical memories. False memory syndrome is caused by memories of a traumatic episode, which are false, but in which the person strongly believes. These pseudo-memories usually arise in the context of adult psychotherapy and are often quite vivid and emotionally charged. Finally, let's discuss how to enhance your memory. There are several ways to enhance memory. Rehearsal, which is just the conscious repetition of information that you have to remember. Chunking, which is organizing information to manageable bits or chunks, like separating phone numbers into 3 chunks, right? The area code, the first 3 numbers, and then the last 4 numbers. Elaborative rehearsal, which is a technique in which you think about the meaning of the new information and its relationship to knowledge that you have already stored in your memory. And mnemonic devices. Mnemonic devices are memory aids that help us organize information for encoding. To remember how many days in each month, some people use the handy-dandy knuckle calendar. In this picture is a person with their hands clenched. The knuckle bump will always have 31 days, and the knuckle gaps will always have 30 days, except for February. January, because it's a knuckle bump, has 31 days. February does not have 31 days. March has 31 days. April has 30 days. May has 31 days, and so on. In this video, we learned attention and memory are both important in learning new information. Attention is the process by which the mind chooses from among the various stimuli that strike the senses at any given moment. Memory is the process of encoding, storing, and retrieving information, and memory includes factual and general information, experiences of events, and skills. For reflection, please take a few moments to consider the following open-ended question. What makes a memory unforgettable to you? I'd love to get your thoughts in the comments below. That's it for this lecture. In the next lecture, we will discuss the psychology of learning. Before you go, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Stats with Torres for more Psych 101. Looking forward to it. Ciao!